Hello and welcome to episode 21 of the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players of the gigging variety. I'm your host David Holloway and it's great as always to be here with you, and I'm also pleased to have the indefatigable Paul Bindig with me again this episode. How's things, mate?
Look, great, and I'm just reaching for the thesaurus now to look up indefatigable.
I'm just impressed I could pronounce it. You keep at it. And speaking of keeping at it, actually, that's a nice segue to this episode's guest. So this episode's guest is Mr. Jeff Babko. Now, I've talked on previous episodes about some of these keyboard players having huge careers and being very busy, but I'd argue Jeff takes it to a whole new level again. He's a go-to keyboard player for a range of artists and situations. I mean, just for starters, since 2003, Jeff's been part of the band on Jimmy Kimmel Live. And as you'll hear, and I do mean just for starters in relation to TV work alone, and then add into that extensive session and touring work with everyone from Neil Young, James Taylor, Sheryl Crow, Frank Ocean, Jason Mraz. Oh, and did I mention he's also hosted a keyboard podcast called the Caffeinated Keyboardist. I'm not sure Well-Rounded does cover Jeff sufficiently, but I do know you will enjoy this interview, so let's do it. Jeff, really appreciate you joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Now, we usually tend to start off these podcasts with asking, or at least over the last few months, asking our guests how they're keeping busy during what's a really awful time with the pandemic. But having seen what you've been up to the last 20 years, I'm actually thinking you need a damn holiday for your physical health. I'm hoping you're actually taking a break.
Well, I'm taking a break from traveling, which is obviously, there's no live work happening right now. So really, I'm noticing just a break from the constant air travel in between my in-town things has really, affected my well-being and my family's well-being. So I'm really, really grateful for that. But I have been keeping busy here in town and at home primarily, and I'm thankful for that too. But really, the slowdown of travel, if I don't have to see LAX, which is our airport here, for another year, that would be absolutely fine with me. I'm cool with that.
Yeah, big airport. No, that's excellent.
Yeah. And the traffic and, all of that, I'm not missing the hustle, the rat race aspect of this business or this town. But if you're asking like what I have been up to, I'm still working remotely for the television show for Jimmy Kimmel Live from the studio in which I speak to you. I deliver audio and video content for that show on a daily and weekly basis. We have guest hosts all summer. Jimmy's taking the summer off, as was his contract negotiated a few months ago, and it turned out great as they were filming in his home, and he had no delineation from his home life or his office life there for a while. So, but I'm real grateful for that and remote recording opportunities here in my studio, both myself and my wife, who's a violinist, who I record as well, and now just kind of very trickling back into the recording studios with very, very strict health and safety mandates, which is cool. I started my last session actually at a doctor's office getting swabbed and things stuck way too far up my nose. But everybody's healthy, and I'm thankful for the temperature checks and all of the restrictions and the guidelines are really great. Everyone's masked, and it's feeling like the people, nobody wants to be liable for anybody contracting COVID, and everyone's being very careful about making sure that us musicians and us employees and workers feel safe.
Just on that one, Jeff, the recording process, how is that actually impacted by the COVID restrictions? So, obviously there'll be masks, as you mentioned, and a certain amount of social distance required. Does it slow things down? Maybe are you having less people in the studio at once, or or is it not really impacted that much in this digital age?
That's a great question. I think, if I were doing, more live orchestral dates, which I had done a lot of in 2019, yes, those are impacted. And I hear about that from my wife, who does that full time. Everyone's trying to figure out how that works, and nobody's, it's still new. And again, the studios, like the big studios, Paramount, Fox, all these big studios, they don't want the kind of responsibility either. So there's a lot of paperwork and a lot of, no one's sharing music stands, and there's distancing appropriate and one-way foot traffic. And that is a little bit awkward for everybody, but appreciated. And in my world, which is usually small band type things, it's only socially awkward. And we all kind of go outside for socially distant mask breaks.
Yeah.
But what is great about it? We've noticed it's cutting back on the snacking, the in-studio snacking. When you have a mask over your mouth, there's no snacks out like there used to be because they can't do that. And B, you don't keep sticking stupid snacks in your mouth because you have something in front of it. So hopefully I'll lose some weight as well.
Fantastic. It's a great silver lining.
Yeah, but it really, as far as you kind of are just doing your job and making music, and when I was first noticing people were trickling back into the studio and seeing the pictures of their masks, I thought, how dumb does this look and how weird is this? But then you forget about it. It's just the norm, and we're all wearing masks, and you're just making music like we always did, and that's what we're focused on anyway. So, but it's nice to get a break from it for 2 seconds. And the other weird thing, as one of the guys was mentioning, just not seeing people's faces is weird in a line of work where you're reading people's, body language and facial expressions when listening back and when tracking. That now you really got to learn what people's the look of their eyes is telling you.
Yeah. If I raise my left eyebrow, that means change key. Yeah.
The trouble, they don't wear shades.
The trouble is that if we end up having to wear masks on stage, we're all going to look like we're part of a Prince cover band.
Absolutely, yes. And hopefully, the older I get, it'll cover up the increasing wrinkles. So there's a silver lining behind all.
Jeff, are you able to share with us a potted history of yourself as a young person and your journey into discovering music and loving it and the bridge that took you to all the different things that you do now?
Sure. I don't remember a time in my life where I didn't love music. As a listener, my father was a music teacher when I was young, and he had a little upright Wurlitzer piano, acoustic piano, and I would just go in there and bang on that piano. And finally, after a while, they realized I really wasn't going anywhere, so they better get me. My dad didn't want to teach me himself because that would be frustrating, which was wise of him. So I took lessons from a young age, and then I was learning a lot off the radio at the time, and so then my classical teacher recommended me to a more kind of pop jazz teacher he was the head of the jazz department. He was a young head of a jazz department here at the California Institute of the Arts. His name is David Roitstein. He's still there. And I would, either get dropped off at the college or ride my bike up and take lessons up there. And he really, the amazing thing about David, he's an amazing teacher, an amazing guy, amazing piano player. But he was encouraging, as I was learning songs off the radio and my cassette tapes. Anyway, he encouraged me to kind of go down that road. And so we were working on ear training based on the things I was already doing anyway, learning songs off the radio. He said, well, let's make a chart for that song, or why don't you show me that lick, write it out. And so he made he based his education on what I was kind of headed, where I was headed anyway. Yeah. And then I was kind of joining, little rock and pop and jazz bands in high school. And then I schlepped off all the way across the country from Southern California to Miami, where my teacher David had gone and studied with this great jazz piano teacher, Vince Maggio, down at the University of Miami. I studied with Vince and graduated in 4 years after doing a lot of jazz gigs down there and kind of what they call society gigs. A lot of cruise ships coming to South Florida, so you'd play for those. And
Sure.
the occasional. There was a lot of clubs, though, a lot of opportunities to play jazz and R&B with really good players. Joined a rock band there. We all came back to LA as soon as I graduated to quote unquote make it. And after about 3 weeks, when I realized that wasn't in the cards, I got a tour pretty quickly, and I formed my own band, and then kind of started balancing all of that from my early 20s. The amazing thing was, at some point I realized I was playing with a lot of the people I was enjoying 10 years prior, just a fan of, I was suddenly playing with. And it was so surreal. You kind of have to look in the rearview mirror to realize, oh, I didn't dream that I could do this with these people. But you kind of just take one foot in front of the other, and then you're sitting there and you go, I guess I was doing homework for this all those years. I thought I was just enjoying music, but I guess I was doing homework. So I have to say it's been a pretty cool journey.
And so, just to follow up on that, when you were younger and that first started to happen for you, and you're playing with people that, as you said, you were a fan of and you admired, was that initially intimidating or exciting or a bit of both, or you were so confident in your competence that it wasn't an issue?
So confident in my competence are words that I'm not sure about. I feel like I'm still learning and still adjusting all the time, and I feel like the second I stop learning and rest on any laurels is the second I start dying, in a way.
Fantastic.
Not to get morbid, but so I think I've always felt like a student, and I've always felt a little bit like that 12-year-old kid that was learning off of the tapes in the living room.
Yes.
Always there's somebody better in the room. There's someone with more experience in the room. There's something that I didn't recognize beforehand that I could get better at. So I have to be available as a listener as well as a player, but I have to have enough confidence to know I can handle it. So so it is a kind of precarious balancing act. And so the long answer is both, a little of both. In every case, I just wanted to make sure I was prepared for the gig. And there are nerves involved, but you just prepare enough so the nerves cannot take over for your preparation. They can't, and again, you look in the rearview mirror, or you reflect at the hotel or whatever on the flight home, and you go, wow, that happened, and that's the really cool part. But really doing the gig to the best of your ability, or in my case, has always been the first objective.
Mm. And one last aside on your formative years, Jeff, I know you mentioned you followed your teacher essentially to Miami, and I believe he had a friend that was a bit of an inspiration to you growing up as well, as he found some success.
Are we talking about Bruce?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, man. Bruce Hornsby had been a student of Vince's. In the, I'm going to say late 70s, along with Dave Roydstein. They were students together at UM. And Bruce actually came to the school to do some of the songs from his Harbor Lights record, which was new then. It was a great record. And why is that not on my list? See the pressure that you guys have given me? Anyway, Bruce was doing some of the songs from Harbor Lights with the school orchestra as a benefit for the school music program on my last year of college. And I was playing as the utility synth guy on the gig. And Bruce and he was really kind and really supportive and really cool. And sometime around the same time period, I went to see that Harbor Lights tour with Jimmy Haslip and John Molo, who I'd met as a kid. John was Bruce's drummer at the time, and John had done sessions for my dad, who had done local jingles, and hired John. So I knew John. So somehow I ended up on the tour bus on that tour as well, just hanging out. And Bruce always treated me like I belonged in the hang, which is like, as a young musician, the coolest part. You can practice all day long and you can learn all the material, but if you can make the hang and be accepted, that really, at least for me, made me feel like I belonged somewhere. and made me kind of want to follow that path, because the hang was the most fun part. That's the payoff. And he was always really cool about that. And I didn't stay in close touch for those first, I think I was probably too intimidated. I did, Molo invited me to see them perform at the Tonight Show when Jay Leno was hosting. And I will admit this on international podcasting. He said, "Oh, come down and say," he's a real loose guy, "come down and say hi." Well, I'm just in the audience at a television show. I don't really know how to come down and say hi. Like, the ushers are telling you very specifically, don't go that direction. You go away into the exit. So somehow I went running after their transportation. It might have been a limo or something, yelling "Bruce, Bruce," tripping over a speed bump and actually falling on my face. So we do, but now we are very close. We were actually just in communication yesterday, Bruce and myself, and he actually really kindly gave me a play-by-play review of my last. It was kind, by the way. It was nice. My last record. Just he'd really listened to it, and we have mutual friends that are in his band, and I just love his last record too. So, he's forever a hero. In 86, 87, when the first Bruce Hornsby and the Range record came out and I was in high school, we didn't have a lot of piano heroes. Definitely, especially not ones that were playing Leon Russell meets Keith Jarrett solos on FM radio. I mean, it was nuts. And to see a guy playing kind of jazz piano solos on Saturday Night Live was nuts. So I did go see that band open up for John Fogerty at the Universal Amphitheater on that first tour, and it was really cool to have a hero like that as a young piano player.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will talk more too about your solo albums, and so it's great that Bruce gave you a blow-by-blow breakdown. I wasn't just being polite to Jeff at the start of the show when I said you're busy, because in preparing for this show, we actually struggled of how to cover your career. And so I've decided to break it down into three distinct areas, which is obviously your non-TV performance work, so your touring work, so to speak, your recording work, and then your TV work. So if you don't mind, I'll start off with the touring stuff first.
How fun.
So maybe if we start off covering how you scored that initial, I suppose you could argue, big gig with Julio Iglesias, and how that set you up for a fairly constant career to date in touring.
Wow, you did your research. That you've gone into the dark web and found my history with Julio. That tour was really weird. The tour wasn't weird. The tour was amazing. In South Florida when I was in college, I had ended up, the one guy that kind of believed in me early on in college was a guitar player that was only a year or two older than I. And he was a South Florida native. Dan Warner was his name. And unfortunately, we lost him last year. But he really believed in me. And he was one of these guys in college that was kind of fully formed already. You could already hear how he played. He was and more of a commercial player than just a jazz player. He really played like a studio musician already. And I remember hearing that, and having grown up in LA and hearing that kind of music kind of, in the air here, I recognized his talent and his gift, and he believed in me, and he got me a lot of gigs there in South Florida. And one of them was with a cover band in Fort Lauderdale, where we played kind of all those early 80s, I don't know what you call it down under, but AOR music, kind of Al Jarreau, George Benson, early 80s, Turn Your Love Around kind of music. And I grew up listening to that music, and so it was a great fit, and we played every Tuesday at this club called O'Hara's in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And what's odd is, I moved, as I said, right out of college. We got in the moving van and went right back to LA. And one by one, all of the guys from that cover band in Fort Lauderdale ended up in Julio Iglesias' band. Julio had decided he wanted a younger band. And these were all the kind of top heavy hitter young guys from Miami area. And one by one, they got the gig, and they were looking for a keyboard player. And he said, "I want an all Miami band. I don't want any ringers." And of course, they tried, I guess, some Miami guys, and it didn't work out. And my friends, God bless them, said, "Jeff is probably your guy." And he said, "I don't want any LA ringers, And they said, "Well, we're going to be in Vegas. Why don't you have him meet us in Vegas and try out?" And so this was 2 or 3 months out of college. I'm here. I'm realizing I'm not going to make it with my band, or that I dropped out of the band. I was kind of just pasting up flyers for my jazz band here and trying to get club gigs and trying to get sessions and just hustling as you do. And I went to Vegas and I auditioned and funny story, at least to me, I had just gotten a regular Friday night gig in Beverly Hills playing for a neurotic female singer. And she had rehearsals and she had a book, and I was going to be the piano player, and we were going to have a gig every Friday night in Beverly Hills. And sure enough, I'm in Vegas, and it's Tuesday, it's Wednesday, it's Thursday, it's Friday, and Julio hasn't shown up to the audition. And they say, you have to stay. Julio, he hasn't heard you yet, and I think you've got the gig. I said, well, I have this gig in Beverly Hills. I got to fly back by, I got to be, that's the only gig I have. And they said, well, if you don't stay, you lose the gig. And I tried to call and cover the gig, and I called the singer. I said, I got your gig covered, no problem. I sent the guy and she just started weeping. She started bawling I'm in a payphone at the MGM Grand, and she's just sobbing. And then I said, you know what? I can't do that to you. I'll see you there tonight. And I got on a plane and I got a call I thought I'd lost the gig with Julio. And the next morning they called and said, you got the gig anyway. And I flew out to the Catskills, north of New York City, and began with Julio, I think 2 days later. And it was being prepared. It was having known all those guys in college, having been prepared on that gig, and not knowing any better, I guess. And I stuck to my guns thinking, well, I've only got one sure shot as the gig I have at home. I got to stay loyal. I can't let that person down. And it was a struggle. I was as stressed as I had ever been, but I stayed with Julio on and off for about 3 years.
Yeah. And then sort of, went on to some other, small time things like Simon Phillips and Robben Ford and Larry Carlton and Toto and so on. So, I mean, across all those amazing, and Sheryl Crow live as well. So what have been the highlights just purely on the live work? What are the highlights that have stood out for you over that time?
Every name you mentioned, I had such positive experiences with. I grew up, when I first heard Larry Carlton, for instance, on I think I first noticed Larry Carlton was Larry Carlton on the Night Fly, the Donald Fagen record. Oh, yep. Every solo was so iconic and such a personality on that record. That guitar was almost like the second voice on the record, I thought. And it was so, and then I realized, I had been listening to Larry on the Crusaders Southern Comfort record, which was my dad's, one of his favorite records, since I was, 3. So his sound was very familiar to him. So when I became, when I got to collaborate with Larry and be in his band and play on his records, that was pretty surreal and really cool. Also with Robben Ford, having been a big fan of the Tom Scott and the LA Express records, Robben's playing, I thought, what I liked about all those guys was there was, coming from the radio and rock and pop and R&B, their sound really was a bridge of jazz language with rock and R&B. It made sense to me. Hearing Larry Carlton's Last Night record live from the Big Potato felt like So What, played by guys that understand contemporary music and contemporary sounds, and played by guys that are in the now. And I loved that. That made sense to me. That spoke to me. So those guys, and I mean, Toto was just those are the tapes I was studying when I was a kid. At my so Toto 4, I basically, David Page taught me how to play piano on pop records, and I always thought David had the greatest feel digging into that piano and his Moog bass playing and his Rhodes playing. It's just that is the template for how to play, I thought, commercial music. So when David decided he wasn't going to go on the tour, and Simon and Luke at that point had recommended me to be the guy, it was really weird going over to Page's studio and he's showing me, how he plays White Sister and the breakdown and how he, when you play the intro to whole line, you got to sit back, all that stuff. And I have to say, standing there in that moment, and then at that point, Bobby Kimmel was in the band again. He'd been back in the band, and there was a point, David sang Africa live, and there was a point Bobby didn't sing. I was supposed to sing Africa, so there was a point in rehearsal where I sang Africa. I was like, there's no. Thankfully, it didn't get past the rehearsal point, but I did sing it at rehearsal, and that tour was really like fantasy camp come to life.
Yeah.
I still really cherish. I was asked to do more tours, and because I was in television at that point, I couldn't. But I will never forget that. That was, standing there. I had guys I remember a guy in East Germany at the time. I guess it was East Germany still. No, it was just Germany. Okay, just Germany. A guy really standing in front of me. I think he was waiting to see Paich, as they do, and just with his arms folded, shaking his head at me. Every time I'd play a Paich thing, shaking his head and pouting, and he'd look at his friend, and every time I'd play something, he'd talk to his friend. I could just tell he was saying, this sucks. This guy's I didn't come to see this. And his friend was getting bored with it. I could see the whole, because you only focus on the guy that doesn't like you ever at a show. So, and then finally, before the encore, we went off stage and everyone's pumped up. And I told Luke, I said, I used more colorful language, but I said, this jerk, he won't stop. He just stands in front. If he doesn't lie, I don't know why he insists on standing in front of me to express how much he doesn't like me. He can stand anywhere, and he said, which guy? And I'll tell you, he went back on stage after that encore and unleashed, as only Steve Lukather can, a litany. I don't know that this guy could speak English, but I think whatever was said, the tone might have spoken volumes. They were really surreal, special moments, and playing those songs with the band. Yeah. Mike Porcaro, God, I love him so much. I loved him, and he was such a special guy. And being in that family, it's a family that I never left. I've never left. They are really special to me. Paich is really special to me. They mean the world to me. Those guys. That was a real special moment for me.
And it's funny, I was going to actually ask you how you found it replacing David Paich, because I saw Toto's tour last year when David was unwell and felt sorry for the brilliant guy that was covering his role last year. And so, I wondered if you'd cop some flack, and you obviously did here and there.
Yeah, most of the Toto fans are real cool. But as that was, especially since that was the first one he missed, I think, and I came in the middle of it, like they had a break in a European tour, and then I'm on the second half. I think, and this is early in days of blogs and things, so they probably thought Dave was going to be there.
That's right.
And I have to say, that's the only guy I remember being a jerk. Everyone was real cool. I tried to bring a different thing to it, a different, a kind of fire. I tried to light Simon up. We had been working together for a while, and we were very close. So I would play the gig differently if I did it now, but I just tried to be the exciting, slightly younger option and get the guys excited. And
that's right.
And that seemed to work out pretty well.
Yeah, it's true. You say too. You play to an audience of a good number of people, and you'll focus on the one guy who's standing there with his with a look like thunder and his arms folded, and instead of people who are loving it. I couldn't
take my eyes off that. It's just like the negative comments on YouTube or anything. All we're going to see is the one guy that doesn't like us, not the however many that do.
Yeah, so true, so true. You mentioned before your TV work that was going on in between, has been going on in between all the touring work. And you've managed a couple of decades of TV work with people like Martin Short and Jimmy Kimmel, to name just a couple. What's the uniqueness about the approach to TV work versus live music, and what gets you excited about doing it after all these years?
Oh man, it goes through waves like anything. Really, these days, I'm at an age where the excitement comes from just the steadiness of it, the dependability of it. When I started working in television back in '99, it was the Martin Short show, which was a short-lived syndicated television show. I was on the Robben Ford tour. I had actually gotten, it was a long, grueling European tour with Robben, and so it'll burn you out. It just, a lot of one-nighters and playing hard and festivals, and I was pretty exhausted, and came back, and And that's a lot of blues, by the way, a lot of blues to play. So after a lot of blues, maybe you get the blues. But I came back, and my buddy had gotten a television show, this Martin Short show, and I was like, oh, who's playing? You know, you always want to know who's on it. And I didn't know one of the keyboard players' names. I don't know that guy. I did know the other one. And oddly enough, I got home and I got called to audition for that show. And I was so green, as we say. I said, oh, no, that show's got guys on it. You don't say that. And they said, oh, well, one of the guys is like, you know, no longer with us. I said, So, you know, back then when I started in 99, and especially when I started the Kimmel show in 03, people would say, gosh, how can you do that day in, day out? Doesn't it get boring? A lot of our heroes, touring guys we know of, and, you know, name musicians saying, gosh, don't you burn out? Isn't that a drag? You can't tour with this and that. And I would say, you know, I kind of enjoy coming into work, seeing the same security guy or gal when I come in, seeing musicians that I love. It changes from day to day. Every day of a daily talk show has a different set of demands, and I laugh at every day. And at Kimmel, I laugh every day. We're friends, the band, so there isn't a day where I don't smile, and that's a pretty cool way to make a living. And thankfully, in this case, you know, they've let me take time off to tour with James Taylor and tour with Cheryl, and so I have gotten to sneak out and you know, do the music thing and play gigs every night and get to, you know, experience a live audience and great bands. So I feel like I've been really fortunate to experience something that's steady. And that can keep me home if I want to, which is great because I have a family. I don't really, I'd rather not have to live on the road, but I can dip my toe in and enjoy that experience from time to time, which has been pretty awesome.
Yes, that's combining the best of both worlds in many aspects.
Indeed.
And look, on that subject, I wanted to talk a little bit, if it's okay, about the work you've done recently on Steve Martin and Martin Short's really recent show, which is, and I'm going to say this for the benefit of our listeners, it's called An Evening You'll Forget for the Rest of Your Life, and you can watch it on Netflix. And as an aside, can I heartily recommend that anyone does, if you're a fan of Steve Martin and or Martin Short, it is hilarious, very, very funny, very good show. And Jeff, you obviously play quite a prominent role in the show, and to the point where I'd say you're almost acting.
Yes,
as well as being a musician. And I'm curious about, well, there's a couple of things I'm curious about. The first one is the overt acting that's going on and actually being involved in a couple of the gags and a couple of the setups that they do. Is that something that's come to you based on your time on TV shows such as Martin Short and Jimmy Kimmel, or is it just something that happened? Or, you know, how was that experience for you of doing that as well?
Shooting the special was pretty nerve-wracking, I'll be honest. Lorne Michaels from Saturday Night Live was one of the producers, and he was there. And you know, I don't have any training in acting. I'm a horrible actor, really. Whenever I was asked to act on the Martin Short show, you know, he would laugh at me. It was so bad. So I think, but playing a version of myself is something different and something fun. You know, I kind of just slip in that character that kind of, you know, if we want to call it a character in that show, is a version of a musician that I know for sure, a version of me even, but a guy that's kind of, he's a little dim. He doesn't really get, like, the way I see it is that guy thinks, that version of me thinks that actually the role of the piano player is interesting to people. You know, as I yammer on your podcast about it. But I think he thinks he's more interesting than he is to most people. You know, he's waiting for his moment, and also, and I know this guy, and I know a lot of versions of this guy. He thinks that people might have come to the show to see him, and there's not a soul at that show that is interested in this guy. But he, you know, he's on stage, so he's going to have his moment, and I love, and I change. I try to change my kind of little monologue every night and just play a version of a musician that's really got he's been waiting all night to say his stuff, and he doesn't have anything interesting to say. We've found like things that work, and sometimes Marty will help, and Steve occasionally too with things that don't work. Like sometimes he says, he'll say, they actually liked you tonight. I said, I know. They actually they felt bad when I cut you off. One of the things I'm supposed to talk and he's supposed to interrupt because it's so boring. He falls asleep. And so, boy, they turned on me because they were interested. I know I don't mean to make it interesting, but I kind of don't know what I'm going to say. I kind of have an idea. And then he's like, oh, if you make a list, like here's the 3 most things. They actually want you to get to number 3. You can't do that. They get mad when so it's a specific guy. You want to feel a little bit bad for him, but you also don't want him to talk too much. He needs to stay in the background. And I kind of have a soft spot for that guy. We all know these musicians that are a little precious, but really not. No one's there to see this guy. So I like that character. I like that guy. Often I even play that guy in the car ride on the way back to the hotel. I'll say, I'm ready for my solo spot. I've got a song prepared, and Marty will always say, no, Jeffrey, no, we don't need your song. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So I'm kind of that guy, and Steve and Marty make me very comfortable. They're very forgiving, and they're also very happy to make notes and also happy to take notes. If I notice, because they're in their own element every night, I usually get to kind of see how the audience is reacting from night to night. Whereas they're actually having to perform, I'm kind of sitting on a bench with the best seat in the house. And I can say, that I don't know if that didn't play because this or that, and it might be a regional thing. It might just be the energy. It might be a news story that's faded. Whatever it is, I really get to be kind of a nice little third eye, in the situation. So that's really fun for me. And I have to also say, in high school, I was such a fan of comedy and such a fan of Three Amigos. We were, it's when you had to rent things and not stream them. And my friends and I rented Three Amigos, I think every other week. So, so I was very familiar and loved those guys and loved Saturday Night Live and Marty's year on SNL and Steve's movies, Man with Two Brains and All of Me and The Jerk. And this was stuff that really, and I think the comedy shares a lot with music, timing and surprise and relatability. So SCTV for us as musicians always relates because it's kind of musician humor in a way. So that's kind of how I fell into that, and I just have to. But it's scary, those are the 2 icons, and it's a precarious seat to be.
And Jeff, do you think their generosity towards you, and it sounds like more generally, is because they don't really have anything else to prove now? They're such masters of their craft. They don't have to stress about the small things anymore.
Wow, that's a great question, and I wish it were true. Worry is a strong word, but they are very concerned with the minutia of every show, and they pick apart. You'd think this would be their victory lap, right? That they could coast. But it is most certainly not. Those guys before the show, usually the first thing when Steve wakes up is he has an idea for tomorrow night's show or tonight's show. Marty is the most prepared, both of them really, the most prepared performers I've ever met. I've really taken a lot of inspiration from their preparation and their commitment to excellence, even at this stage in the game for each of them. And I think their generosity comes from knowing that I understand where they're coming from, hopefully, and get what the baseline is of where we're at in the show, and they expect that I'll be able to handle, to carry my weight, and yeah. So, but boy, I can't stress enough how seriously they take it, even at this, which is so cool.
Which is what I suppose any true master of their craft does. They don't just sit back, because once you start sitting back, you're no longer really a master.
Yeah, I think they would give up before they turn in a substandard, product.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, talking about your career to date, Jeff, you've obviously spent lots of years with just your feet up doing nothing. So I assume in all that spare time, that's when you've recorded your 4 solo albums and played on a huge number of other albums, which I'll get onto in a sec as well. But solo work first, do you tend to work material up over time with each album, or you're more of a jump into an intensive writing period and recording session?
Wow, great question again. Each album has been different. My first album, I was such a kid. I was just trying to, I think, prove something or make a statement. So I could get gigs. I don't think I should have made an album then. But what else did I didn't know any better. I did what I thought you do. And it's fine. And I started a long partnership with my friend Mike Elizondo, who became an amazing producer, pop producer and writer, and he's just an incredible instrumentalist. And we've been close since high school. So fun to have that experience on the first record. But I was just writing jazz songs, thinking maybe my jazz group can get gigs and maybe get on the radio or something. And then as the next one, the next album was mostly just things at my friend Tas Panos, who's a drummer, at his house, his home studio, and that was us just messing around really and putting. He had a new digital recorder device, at the time, this is like late 90s, and we were basically just playing for that device and seeing how it sounded back, and it became an album. And then. Really, then I made an album called Crux, which was probably the most composed, thought out. I want to make an album before we have an 8-year-old son. I wanted to have an album before we had our son, so I would, because I wasn't sure if I'd ever have time to do that again. And I had collaborators in mind, and Tim LaFave, great bass player, had just moved to town, and I wanted to make music with him, and Matt Chamberlain, great drummer, and Mark Isham. And I'm real proud of that album because I actually did work really hard at writing stuff that I thought, it was definitely thought out and composed. And the last album that I did, called El Músico, was really not supposed to be an album. It was just me in my studio messing around with gear, and also a bunch of songs that I'd written for a local gig, Tuesday night gig here in town at a little bar called ETA. And between the two things, I had an album, and I thought the music should come out. I felt like I liked this music, and I thought, why not? It shouldn't just, sit dormant in a disk drive. So that was a kind of different version of events for every album. I feel like now an album will come out when it seems like it's supposed to, almost, and there's no record companies banging down anybody's door. And so if the music kind of sprouts out of the ground and seems ready, then let's pick it and put it out. We're working on another album by this kind of collaborative, cooperative group called Band of Other Brothers. We're writing for that album, and I think we're going to be recording it remotely with Keith Carlock and Nir Felder and Jeff Coffin from Dave Matthews Band, and Will Lee. And we're kind of moving on that, and we start kind of recording this month. So excellent. That's the next batch of stuff.
Good stuff. And all recommended listening, and we'll link to them in the show notes. But I've enjoyed the hell out of listening to those. And obviously then with your recording work, and again, I don't know where to start with the amount of albums you've played on, so probably just best to ask you again some highlights for you, whether it's, at the top of your list there, you've got Neil Young, which you could spend 3 episodes on alone, I'm sure. But what are some of your recording highlights for other artists?
That Neil Young is hilarious to me. That was such a random record. Michael Bearden, who's a great keyboard player in and of himself, we had worked on the Emmys, which is the big television, awards show here in Los Angeles. We had done it together for a few years. Actually, Paige had done it before, of all things. And Paige bowed out, and I came in, and Steve Jordan and Michael were handling the music, and Michael and I became close. And Michael had arranged the orchestra parts for the Neil Young, half of the record of this Neil Young record, and really just didn't want to play the whirly part and conduct. So I think it happened like I got called on a Monday for a Tuesday, and it was a Kimmel shoot day, and I thought, oh gosh, do I send my sub to Kimmel or do I play on a Neil Young orchestral record? And I did the right. I'm really glad I did it. Neil was so cool. You know, everything on that record he tracked live with the orchestra, which was just phenomenal. You know, really cool. Him singing, you hear his voice in your headphones. You just go, wow, that's Neil Young. That's definitely, there he is. I see him over there, but I can't believe I hear him in my headphones. So that was a good one. Yeah, so many fun. There's a Frank Ocean first record called Channel Orange that was a lot of the records that I've done like are kind of surprises. You know, as a working musician, you just kind of, they come out of nowhere. That one, Matt Chamberlain said there's a really cool producer named Malay. He's got a new artist, Frank Ocean. You want to come play? And it was me and Matt and Charlie Hunter were the rhythm section, and Charlie was playing the bass and the guitar parts as he does simultaneously. And we played 2 tracks, and I think the waiting around to record on each of those tracks was at least 4 times the amount we actually tracked the songs. The songs are like 2-3 takes, and I didn't realize that would become, you know, a kind of seminal album. You just don't know.
Right.
But they were really cool songs, and I remember as we were tracking them, they were letting us jam, and a lot of that stayed on the record, and so that was pretty great. Geez, what other recordings?
Well, I do want to take an Aussie angle, and you've done 2 Colin Hay albums at least. So we obviously worship Colin and Men at Work a bit down here. So, I mean, how was that working with Colin?
Yeah, gosh, I've done a bunch with Colin, and thank you for bringing him up, because he's one of the, as you know, as a national treasure. He's one of the greatest humans. I just love him. Yeah, we've been working together on and off for, it has to be almost 20 years. Wow. Yeah, it's been I played in his band live, and we had some hilarious shared experiences doing that, and we just get along so well and have such a good time. And every time I go to a studio, it's another song that just seems like it's a classic song. You just go, all I got to do is not mess this up and make it worse. They're already there, and it just sounds like Colin, and his voice, he opens his mouth and it's that voice, and he's such a great storyteller. And yeah, really my job on those things is to make him happier about the song than when I got there. If I can make him light up with some little color that I add, then I'm happy, but really just not get in the way of the song, because he's so good. He's just, God, he's special.
He is. No, and thank you for that anecdote. And I need to add for our listeners, I've skipped over a bunch of other artists Jeff's played on, like, you know, just little known people like Don Henley and Alanis Morissette and so on. But we could take all day.
Yeah, the problem we've got, David, is if we just list verbally the artists that Jeff's played with, that would actually take up the entire time of the podcast.
Oh, you guys. Yeah, I mean, and all of those, like, really is one of those, like, Don, too. It's similar as the Neil Young. Like, you put on the headphones and you hear Don Henley's voice in your ears, and you're just, like, chills talking about it even. It's so surreal to hear this. It's those real special voices. Colin's one of them too. Yeah. Just this voice comes in, you go, that's the guy. Like, and I'm going to make music with that person. And it's a special experience. I don't take a second of those for granted when I'm cutting those records or just recounting the experience. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Jeff, a question we ask all of our guests is about their gear, and if you don't mind sharing, can you let us know what are some of the essential pieces of keyboard gear that would be your go-to bits of equipment that you use?
It's always changing, right? That's the problem with us keyboard players. We can't, they put something cool out, and it's like, I will say I can go backwards, work backwards, and say I'm not really a soft synth guy. Because I always, and maybe just because I'm lazy, but I really think that most producers and film TV composers and songwriters have all of the soft synths, and they kind of master it in their own laptops and home computers, and they can all kind of do that and manipulate it at home. And so when they come over here to my studio to work, or when I send them tracks, I've always got my B3 and Leslie mic'd up. I've got kind of my favorite recording Fender Rhodes here set up with my pedal boards and then just a bunch of workhorses here in the studio. I'm looking now. I'm here now. So I love the sequential circuits stuff. I use the Prophet 6 a lot. I use the OB6 quite a bit. I really like their new Pro 3 is just which came out this year, is just it's really one of those synths that you turn on and it makes you want to make music. It inspires you, and I think those are that's another great thing about hardware synths and keyboards, like, because it's something you can touch it. It's a tangible item and all the knobs are right. It coaxes, I feel it coaxes music out of me, so I love that. I love twiddling the knobs in real time. So those synths are great. I'm a Korg artist, so I wouldn't be able to do the Kimmel show without my Kronos, to be honest. Yep. The Kronos is such a user-friendly workhorse, and the touch screen is just so great. Like, if I have to score a live comedy bit, I can really get any instrument, any combination of instruments in the combination mode on the Kronos so easily, and I could mix it on the fly, and it just makes it really easy. It's really like, so many guys depend on Mainstage and stuff. For me, that Kronos, A, it's not going to crash, and B, I can really get it. Just goes. It's just so great for a gig like that, and I always have one set up at my studio as well, because it's all of the patches are so usable, and it's such an amazing synth. And I actually just got their Wave State as well, which came out this year. And that's another one that's really, it's, first of all, it weighs like, I don't remember if you guys are metric or pounds, but it weighs nothing. Yeah. It weighs like no pounds. I don't know how it weighs so little. And it's got under the dash, under the hood, as we say, it's got so much going on. It's got endless possibilities. It's an amazing little piece of gear with, that wave station technology is just bonkers. Like, you can just really unpeel that thing and discover all kinds of layers and it's timbres and beats, and it's so cool. Yeah. So I don't know if that's an answer, but, and then, clavinet and my Wurlitzer and all the old classics, standbys.
Great stuff. And also, I'm hoping you can give us a bit of advice, Jeff, because I'd argue you may have been the world's first keyboard player to do a podcast, and obviously we're doing something in the same sort of vein. So I know it's been a few years since you've done the podcast, but what did you learn from doing that? And for our listeners, it is still able to be listened to and is well worth a listen. It's a roundtable discussion. But what did you learn from that, Jeff? And do you miss it?
Wow, it's nice of you to ask about that. Yeah, I have I have fond memories of the podcast, and if it, as you guys know, it's time consuming. And the thing about it being a roundtable, it was 4 of us for every episode, and I was just trying to mix people's dialogue, so make sure that the listener who can't see lips moving could hear who was who, and I was panning things, and I was trying to get it so I learned so much from that program, and I loved trying to pit different people, because we're all keyboard players, but there's so many versions of, quote unquote keyboard player. And I loved hearing guys react to other players that just didn't have, just hearing perspectives kind of collide and be shared and hearing stories be told that you only really tell when you're around other musicians. That's so fun. So I really miss it, but it was so much work, and I wish I could do it. I almost relaunched it a couple years ago, and then I didn't, but you never know. You guys have taken over the reins, so I'm good.
No, that was very generous.
Yeah, it was very generous. But no, it's well worth it. It's amazing people that you talk to, and you're right, particularly when you're trying 4-way, that's a massive undertaking. So I can understand that.
Even just scheduling was nuts. Yeah.
Okay, so now we have another, I guess I'll call it a standard question, but when we love to ask people who've done a significant amount of touring work, can you share with us a memorable train wreck where maybe something rather unexpected has happened on stage and you've had to navigate your way through it?
Oh, where do you begin? I remember, well, not mine. So I was on tour in '96 in the summer. I'd taken a break from Julio because there was a younger artist that was really cool. He'd put an album out that kind of sounded like Seal meets Lenny Kravitz if Trevor Horn produced him, well, Trevor Horn did produce Seal, but it was a cool, and I thought, oh yeah, this is the kind of music I actually listened to. No offense to Julio, but that was for a different generation of listeners, and this was a fun band, and I toured with him, and I remember it didn't work out, and I could tell it was kind of a sinking ship because just mismanaged and record, it just wasn't gonna fly. It was one of those artists, good intentions and almost, but it wasn't gonna take off, and so I had left, but I had one more gig to do, and that night I had a big solo, kind of like a horrible discount Kenny Kirkland with Sting solo, like that was my moment, my 16 bars to play pretend, and I remember that the keyboard, it was an Apex keyboard stand, and it was a big Kurzweil PC-88 that by bar 2 was that was a heavy synth, and it had fallen off of the stand. The whole stand had collapsed. Bar 2 of my solo, and I did finish the solo on my feet. And that same thing happened, which is like on the internet now. This with Mark Juliana, and it's kind of gone viral. But the synth fell. The stand collapsed when I was playing a gig here in town, and I didn't even think twice about it then because it's all improvised music, and the synth falling was just part of the madness of the gig. So really it was, and it was the last songs. It was like, whatever. There was a horrible stand. And so that's never fun, but that one didn't bother me as much. It just didn't, until it just kept getting sent to me via YouTube like 1,000 times. And the other one that I remember being really funny is when I was a backup keyboard player for George Duke, the great George Duke. He was always into technology, and he always had a great MIDI keyboard tech, and they were always trying to perfect his wireless MIDI situation because he liked to go out into the studio. Out into the house, into the audience, and play his solos out in the audience, and people loved it, But you can't have a cable going on, so he had wireless MIDI, and I'm talking every gig that thing stuck. Every gig, he'd go out to the audience, he'd go, and then you'd see the keyboard tech, running on. It was so Spinal Tap, and I remember feeling so bad for George because you'd run it at rehearsal and it would go great, and he'd say, let's see how far you're back, and it never. I don't remember one gig where it didn't stick. So that's always what I remember. Even George Duke, couldn't God rest his soul, couldn't overcome technical fails.
That's amazing. I love that. And then the final question that you've been stressing about, Jeff, the Desert Island discs. So 5 albums you couldn't live without.
Yeah, so I've got 38.
Cool.
No, I do, but gosh, okay, well, I made a list. Now, I see 11 on this list, but I numbered 5 because that was the task at hand. But I'm a huge Todd Rundgren fan, and Utopia's album POV, which is not an album that I think a lot of people, most of the Utopia fans love like Raw and their old albums, but I love the kind of pop version with Kazim Sultan and POV. I just realized when you ask, and these Desert Island discs always change, right? But that album, I always go back to. Every song in that album speaks to me, the wildlife and stand for something and play the game and Secret Society. Like Mimi Gets Mad. Every song in it, I just love. And Roger Powell was such a cool synthesizer player too. But just Todd and Kazim and the writing, I love the songs on that record. So that record I always come back to. So I don't think I'd be able to be on an island without it. Yeah. I always find I end up listening to it on a plane or in a car, or it just feels good to me.
Great call.
Wayne Shorter, Speak No Evil, on the other end of the spectrum. I love Wayne's writing on that record. I remember buying that record. I remember the day I bought it. I remember Freddie Hubbard's solos just being perfect. I remember Herbie Hancock's comping and Elvin, everything about it. I think it's a flawless jazz record. So I would include that. Jan Hammer's Oh Yeah record for All Us Keyboard Geeks. Oh my gosh, that record. I did a kind of tribute to that record last year with a band here with Chad Wackerman and Jimmy Johnson and Charlie Bisharat, and made me appreciate it even more. Boy, the writing on that and Jan's playing is just mind-blowing and flawless, and it's so unique. He has that Eastern European kind of harmonic and melodic sensibility, and then just as far as just his time is just like a clock and just ferocious, and his ease of tempos. He's just I love that album, and I love the band on that album too. Tony Smith, who's a sweetheart of a guy on drums. I just love that record. What else do I have here? Oh, Thomas Dolby, Golden Age of Wireless. I put. I love that album, and I love the writing on that album. It's hard for me to imagine how young he was and how much he'd mastered the technology. But the part, and it's hard for me to choose between that and The Flat Earth, his second album. But his writing is so mature and harmonically, chordally, so interesting and kind of adult and informed. It's not simple. It's almost, you could argue that it has almost Steely Dan density, and it's harmony. It's at times there's just beautiful writing, and then if you strip that away and just take the technology, what he was achieving technologically is it's incredible what he did on that first record. And the last one on that, the first five, and then I'll go by the other ones quickly. But I had Miles Davis, Seven Steps to Heaven. I'm such a Miles fan, and I was talking to my wife about it the other day, and Miles and Brian Eno to me kind of signified over the course of their career, like how to push beyond what even you understand. And as an artist, you're going on to the next thing before you've even wrapped up the last thing. You're fearless of what's happened and what's to come, and you're just diving, forward into the unknown. And that album, although it's traditionally jazz, he's got a new band in half the record with Herbie and Tony Williams. But he's got also one of my favorite keyboard players of all time, Victor Feldman, on the rest of the tracks. And I love the way that record swings, and I love the sound of it, and I love the writing. So those are the top five. And then I had ABC Lexicon of Love and Talking Heads Remain in Light, and Herbie's Thrust record, and the Meters Rejuvenation, and of course the Nightfly and Asia. So Royal Scam, those are all on there too, and there's probably 20 others, but that's what I could come up with. If I only had a small briefcase and actually CD, those would have to get in there.
No, great calls. Jeff, I'm not being, again, polite when I say we could spend 5 episodes talking, but thank you for taking the time that you have. It's been an absolute revelation, and we look forward to seeing you continue what you're doing for many, many years to come.
Thank you so much, and I miss being in Australia, and I hope to be back soon. I love it there, and you guys are in a special place, and you're doing something special to my heart, focusing on keyboard players, and thank you.
Oh, that was one interview, Paul. What a pleasure it was talking to Jeff.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a worry because I think we say this every episode, but just what a great guy, and so generous with his and so humble, and he's just done so much work. And I don't know about you, David, but it was a bit challenging to work out what to ask him because he just has such a huge canon of work.
I'd like to put Jeff amongst a bunch of our other guests on notice. You may be asked back for a second episode down the track. Yeah, no, that was amazing. I think Jeff made a really good point in regards to the Martin Short and Steve Martin stuff. Even if you're a master of your craft, and Jeff would probably be the first to say he's not, even though he obviously is, you never take your foot off the pedal, and that's what makes the difference. So, Yeah, amazing stuff. All right. So the Keyboard Chronicles will be back again in a fortnight or so, but just a reminder that you can keep in touch via a few means. Our website, as always, is www.keyboardchronicles.com. Just to mention again that we've had a bit of a facelift on the website. There's a weekly newsletter that you can sign up for if you'd like to hear some of the latest news around keyboards and people making music on them. It's free, we're getting quite a lot of subscriptions to that, which is very gratifying. We're also on Facebook at facebook.com/Keyboard Chronicles, Twitter at the Keyboard CHR1, good old-fashioned email. You'll find us at editor@keyboardchronicles.com. If you'd like to become an official supporter, we do have a Patreon account, obviously not compulsory. Maybe we should make it compulsory, Paul. How many people would fall for that?
We definitely need to make it compulsory.
Right.
Scratch what David just said. It's actually compulsory. Stop listening now if you're not prepared to sign up for the Patreon.
That's right. For the price of a coffee a month, you can help us go from strength to strength, and that is at patreon.com/Keyboard Chronicles. A huge thank you again to Paul for joining me again this episode. It was a lot of fun.
It was an absolute pleasure, and thank you again for inviting me to be part of it, David.
And most importantly to you, our esteemed listeners, thank you for listening, and we hope to see you back here next episode.